Hi, everybody, and welcome to the second part in our Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Rings Extended Edition DVD commentary. My name's B007, and I am joined by Matthieu. Hi, Matthieu.
Hi, everybody.
Great to have you back. Really enjoyed our part one commentary. So today we are starting at, if you're watching on DVD or on a streaming service, it should be chapter 28. Gilrain's Memorial, which is 1 hour and 45 minutes into the film. So I will count us down 3, 2, 1, go, at which point you hit play. So hopefully we're all synced up. And just to warn you all that there will be spoilers probably for all of Tolkien's oeuvre and maybe also A Song of Ice and Fire. So 3, 2, 1, play. So we open on some nice elvish scenery.
And randomly Legolas walking down some stairs, and then we cut to... I mean, because that was in the obviously in the cinematic version, and they cut this scene out with Aragorn at his mother's tomb.
So tell me about Aragorn's mum, because I don't know who she is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about her either. I just know that, I know I never really looked up the character, to be honest, so I'm not really sure. It's just
very, she looks like the Virgin Mary as a Catholic. It's
yeah,
just like how
that's
all
true.
statues of the Virgin look.
I always thought about that as well, but this is something important because Elrond, at least in the appendices to Return of the King, where they discuss the relationship between Aragorn and Arwen, Elrond doesn't want Aragorn to get together with his daughter unless he declares himself king of Gondor, because he says, if you're going to be a mortal man, hanging out with my daughter, you might as well just be the best, the most awesomest mortal that it exists, right? So, yeah, it's a bit of elvish arrogance, I think, that comes through that, but it's not in the main text, so we shouldn't
Worry about
maybe
it too much.
Yeah. And here we have the scene with Bilbo and Sting.
Sting.
Yeah, which I always found was a nice name for dagger, basically, because that's what it is, right? It's not actually a real sword. I think it's
Ooh,
a
Mithril.
yes.
This is
Oh,
really pretty.
yeah. And there is Bilbo's cocaine hanging around Frodo's neck.
Such a scary scene. As we discussed last time, I think it makes more sense if this comes before the Council of Elrond, because I think seeing this impact on Bilbo would be a great motivating reason for Frodo to go to Mordor.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it almost looks like, why would he agree to do such a thing? Just,
Yeah.
oh my god, that's such a horrible shot.
And this is where this. I mean, I think when he sees what the ring does to Bilbo, it's sort of a reminder of why this thing must be destroyed, because it looks rather innocuous. It looks rather harmless. So, and yeah, Bilbo obviously sorry for having to let Frodo go, right?
hmm
Because it's something that I don't feel that. I mean, Bilbo had it rather easy, right, with the ring. So it's not an
Although, in
adventure.
fairness, he rarely used it after the events of The Hobbit, so
Mm.
did he have it easy or was he just restrained?
Yeah, I think it's probably just because the ring didn't have as strong an influence on the bearer at that time. I think with Sauron still weakened, so I'm not sure that he actually had to live through the same ordeal that Frodo had with the rings. So I
Oh,
think
that's
it's
definitely true, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I just think it's a wonderful performance. It's also, it wouldn't be believable if Ian Holm weren't such a wonderful actor, right? I mean, I can't see anyone else as Bilbo at this point. Even Martin Freeman as the younger Bilbo. I mean, he does a
I
wonderful.
think they both work really well and they're both believable as a young and old version. I think it's
Mm.
really great casting, actually.
Yeah, he's consistently good in I mean, the role is at least consistently good in all the films, so I like that.
Oh,
And so
that's so
now,
cute. Mordor Gandalf, is it left or right?
yeah,
Oh. Why
yeah.
doesn't Elrond... I know we've done this a lot, but, Elrond, powerful elf, go with them.
No, probably he just doesn't want to get, doesn't want to leave his house unattended.
Bit
So
selfish.
yeah, but that's what I mean, the elves they sort of, and we haven't even. Well, I mean, we discussed it. I'm on the Silmarillion VOK occasionally, so we sort of discuss what all the elves are doing. We haven't even gone into the most tiring stuff yet that they have to get through. So the elves they've done some they've been dealt some pretty bad cards. So I'm not sure why they would get involved in anything ever.
What
So.
were those ruins that they were just all walking past?
Oh, they in the Silmarillion, you mean they were?
No, just here in the movie, they just walked past some random ruins. Maybe they were just random
Oh,
ruins.
I think they just go south, right? I mean, the chapters the ring goes south or something like that. So
Yeah.
so I'm not exactly sure. They're going alongside the Misty Mountains. So because
Apparently,
they
Sean
want to
Bean
get.
is very scared of heights, so this...
Yeah. But this I like this because this is a real location, right? They enhanced it probably with CG, but most of it is still in the world. I mean, I don't think these rocks are there.
sausages.
Yeah,
Big a bit
and
of shout out to Shane, East Texas Dalworth, who thought I was going on about how much I love sausages and swords, like that in the
well,
last part of this, and he said sausages and swords sounded like the title of a gay porn movie. Because I was saying it should be my house motto.
uh,
But this is a great sausages and swords scene, which makes me
yeah.
happy.
And now we get the Crabine of the. I mean, yeah, Pippin and Merry fighting Boromir and winning. So there you go. For people who say that only the most skilled people win, like that's not always true. You just have to fight dirty, and then you can beat
But
anyone.
I think it's an important scene because we have to see Boromir as a nice guy,
Yeah.
as one of the guys that, there was the capacity for goodness and laughter before the ring got hold of him.
And we know that he got along with Merry and Pippin specifically, right? So there's, I mean that's something that will be relevant for to the end of the movie anyway. So
Yep, for sure.
and now we get, yeah, crows.
Crabine?
Crabben, I think, of Dunland, which they are,
Quick, hide the sausages.
yeah, birds. I mean, if you go into the city, you see like birds coming out. I mean, they're coming towards you immediately because they suspect that you have something to eat. But so I would say, like, if you leave something out there here, they're probably gonna go for it.
Better a cold sausage than no sausage.
Yeah, and this is a lovely, lovely shot on the Caradras,
Yeah, for sure.
which I found this part of the story to always be the most interesting because you're in the middle of the world, right? You're sort of exploring all these big places, and suspecting the presence of creatures that you don't know anything about, and so it's
See, so that's interesting. Like, do you so this? If we take the movie basically as having 6 parts, so to say, and
yeah.
this is part 2, how would you rate this? Because this is one of my least favorite parts, actually, because it's more, to my mind, it's more, I don't know, action focused, but not big battles. I love big battles, but I don't really like so much the stuff inside Caradras. This is more the kind of there's more walking kind of element.
Oh yeah.
I mean, obviously the Galadriel stuff is amazing, and then Boromir's death. But yeah, I always find like Fellowship Part 1 I like more because it has the Council of Elrond. But yeah, I never really responded as much to this part.
To me, it's just like exploring. It's like you don't. I mean, the world seems limitless here. Because the big scope and everything, so you sort of the anticipation of going to places that you haven't seen before and everything. That's sort of what draws me in. I get why people say, "Well, these films are just a bunch of people walking," and that's true. But at the same time, they're walking through interesting places, and if you go into the woods, you for a walk, you're just walking as well, but you still enjoy it a lot, and I enjoy this a lot. So
maybe it's because they're all still together, so basically you're seeing one set of worlds, so to say. Whereas when you get to Two Towers, in particular, it's so split up that you really do feel like you've got the whole map in front of you, and you're just zooming in on different parts each time.
Yeah.
The industrial monolith that is Saruman.
and I mean, I think this was a conscious decision that they wanted to make Saruman the more obvious antagonist in the first two films, because otherwise, Sauron being off screen the whole time is not going to make you feel the presence of the antagonist. So they had to beef up Saruman's role, and I think it's actually a good decision.
So it's Saruman who sends the snowstorm, right? Not Sauron?
Yeah, no, this is, I mean, in the book, I think it's just because the mountain is sort of considered by them to be a bit grumpy,
Yeah, it's like one of
what's
those, like we always talked about in the books, that you could have, there's evil that comes like specifically from Sauron and Saruman where they actively do something, but there's also just sort of nature, like deep in the earth of this magical place. There is a deep good and a deep bad, and sometimes it's nothing to do with Sauron and Saruman. It's just
But here in the film, obviously, they want to give you the impression that it's Saruman causing this, which is a good idea, at least for the film, because you need to make sure that people don't forget. Oh yeah, there's a villain in this, or there are villains in this. So,
but I think it's sad in a way, because it takes away that understanding that there's a deep power in the world itself, and and I know completely why they do it. They've got to make it seem like there's a protagonist and an antagonist and give it narrative drive. But by taking out things like Tom Bombadil or taking out things like that, you just sort of make it a much simpler place. I love the layers in Tolkien that you have, like an evil like a Shelob that's pre-existing, and then you have the layers of evil that come with the Sauron and Saruman. But yeah, it's just a simpler place, a less rich place as a consequence, I think.
Yeah, and this, but actually they bring it back. I mean, by at least with the visual details when they have, for example, the book that Saruman is just looking at, and all that stuff. These details, how everything looks, and the design and everything, and now the creatures and so on. I think it still retains most of it. It loses what would be considered world building to a certain extent. I wouldn't say that it's completely lost. It's just it's changed to fit a tighter narrative, I think. And if you're adapting something, that's always what's going to happen. Shit will change. So
do you think Gandalf makes a sucky decision here, because he's given the options of going through Rohan close to Isengard, going into the mountain, and then he kind of like lets it go to Frodo, which I always think was a bit of like a pussy move. Like I can't make up my mind, so let me throw it onto the poor little hobbit.
No, because I think I think actually it's rather an empowering move for Frodo, because he thinks that he's the ring bearer, so I mean I'm going to follow whatever decision he makes, right? Because he has the responsibility.
He makes it very quickly as well. He's very certain. Right, we're going through the mines.
Yeah, in the book, I think it's rather difficult for them to decide, right? I'm trying to remember now. But at the same time, it's like going near Isengard is not a good idea anyway. So what other good choices do they have? Basically, it's you're caught between a rock and a hard place. So and this I find is actually dwarf elven. Xenophobia again, like digging into each other, which, I mean, at least with the extended edition, you sort of get more of the characters, of the character development, because I know that people will say, well, Gimli and Legolas, they're just, caricatures in the films. And I mean, I guess why some people say, the characters in the books are not very deep, especially. But yeah, here at least they sort of give them nice touch and character.
Absolutely, and that's the nice thing about the extended edition. You do get a few more of those character beats. I thought that was actually just quite a nice scene where Gandalf actually just takes a moment to, give Frodo some advice and say, "Look, watch out! The ring's getting stronger. Evil's going to be drawn for you. Watch out, even within the Fellowship." It's for a man who we have often accused of just running off at the crucial moments, he actually does show a kind of paternal care, which is rare, I guess.
And we see, we haven't commented on the previous scene where Boromir takes the ring, and so we're sort of, it could be much more obvious, right? Hello?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so
Yeah.
it'll be much more obvious. Um, I guess it's because it's meant to convey an atmosphere of there's some kind of tension because for people who are not as familiar with the story as we are, um, they might still not be sure exactly who it's going to be, right? So I mean, it's uh
I have to say, the scene where Gandalf stands in front of the elvish door and
yeah.
tries.
Oh, and build a pony. They have to.
Oh, it's so funny.
Who had a bigger role in the books, if I remember right. So, yeah.
Yeah, which I'm sure is very World War One inspired. But we did. I spent like 5 hours in the garden yesterday, like not chopping down trees, but sort of hacking through dead wood in the back of the garden, and sort of found this amazing long twisted gnarled sort of branch that just looked like a Gandalf staff.
Oh yeah, like the old Gandalf stuff. Gandalf
Yeah.
White has a different one.
So I've kept it aside in case Jed ever wants to do some fancy dress or whatever, because it's just so perfect.
I also have one that kind of looks like the staff from the movies, which I kept next to the fireplace. So
Nice.
yeah,
So I'm not the only one. Excellent.
yeah, everyone can be Gandalf.
Yeah. Oh.
Oh yeah, in the book it's actually Mary who guesses it, right? Who says melon?
Is it?
I think it's or is he? I'm sure that someone else guesses the word, or that someone asks Gandalf, what is the dwarfish word for friend and stuff. So and here now, Gimli's sort of trying to impress people, even though there's nothing actually impressive about it now. A mine. So many good quotes from the film that made it into popular consciousness. And yeah, the dwarves everywhere.
I wonder if the reason I don't respond to this part of the film because I'm basically quite scared of dark places
Oh, could be. I mean,
on a subliminal level.
my brother, he loves this part of the story actually because he likes going underground basically here in the story, and darkness, and you don't know exactly what's in there and how deep it is and how immense the place actually is, and that the dwarves actually built it, and it's the history of it and everything. It's quite he thinks it's quite interesting. But yeah, I guess some people might not respond to it as much because it's in the film actually it's not that much of a. I think it's not that long.
Yeah, it's quite. Yeah, you're right. They don't
Now
spell
we
off.
get the Watcher in the water, which is apparently a creature that's been around longer than anything else. It's like a kraken, but
It's
I
such
think
a it's such a Star Wars scene. This.
yeah, it is. That's what I always thought. It's like this is one of the aliens from Star Wars that's escaped, like the thing in the water.
This
When
is
they're
like when they're in the rubbish sheet and Luke
yeah,
Skywalker
yeah,
gets like dragged down.
yeah, but
I wish.
now Star Wars fans will say, well, they ripped it off.
Yeah, but Star Wars itself, like, couldn't George Lucas
Yeah,
have ripped off Tolkien, right? Because I mean, he's basically in the Star Wars film ripping off things like Tolkien, but also ripping off
yeah,
Saturday morning serials and Pulp Fiction. So,
yeah.
um,
Gandalf is basically Obi-Wan. So for people who haven't figured it out, and yeah, now they go through Moria, which is I like it also because it's quiet. Most of it is quiet. It's long moments of silence and ponderous discussions about uh, history of the place and the dwarves, and yeah, it's actually that. I mean, the fact that they have to take that much time to get through it is actually what interests me, because I
or
think
just how
it
big
gives
it
us
is.
time. Because that, and it gives us time to look around the place. Get a real feeling of the area of Middle Earth that they're in. So yeah, but Gandalf obviously and his uh torch basically.
I'm gonna have to do some kind of electrical jiggery pokery with my stick to
uh, but
It's like the Swiss knife of staffs, isn't it? It can do all sorts of things.
and here we see Mithril again. Not really given like a good look at. I mean, we sort of see it reflected in like in the faces of the characters here, but we don't actually see a lot of it. This,
It feels like the production design here is much more like created, and that they're walking through it. Whereas in The Hobbit, it felt much more when they're in the mines. It's all CGI. CGI. It's like much more real.
sorry.
It feels like the scale here is much more believable in a way. Whereas in The Hobbit, those caves and mines feel almost too big. It's almost like Aladdin or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's and this rather it seems rather small here, and there's not much
But I
space.
prefer it in a way. Because surely
Yeah,
that's how it would feel
that's the
going through a mine, right? It would be sort of
mm,
going through kind of cut, hewn out tunnels rather than big, wide caverns.
yeah. And so now they are basically at a crossroad, and so they have to make a choice again. Which you would have to. You could basically just imagine maybe if they went somewhere else, they might have had much bigger problems. Maybe, I mean, I'm not sure, but it's just I think that the fact that they're taking their time with this part of the book is actually really really interesting. Even though like overall, I don't think it takes up that much time in the movie. But
I agree.
yeah,
I
it's
agree.
it's it's still like the fact that they're taking their time with it and spending it on characters, discovering something and thinking about stuff, and that's why uh, I think I like it so much. And here we have the old version of Gollum, which looks nothing like the version in Two Towers.
And
Because
a very, very important speech by Gandalf about the pity of Bilbo.
oh yeah, which he actually gave in one of the early chapters in the books. So I like the fact that we get some of the dialogue from the books, but at different points in the story, because basically you can make it much more poignant if you put it at another place, right?
Agree.
So mixing it around, because you have sometimes in the later films you have sometimes lines from the second book put into the third movie and vice versa. So I think that it's also a good, it's obviously fan servicey in a certain way, but it works because it's this dialogue that is not overwritten.
And I love the idea that of explaining that some of its fate, if Bilbo was meant to have the ring, then Frodo was meant to have it. And,
Mm,
when Gandalf says that's an encouraging thought, I think that's very sweet.
yeah, and it also makes Frodo a more responsible person. Um, because now, I mean, that's also something he doesn't want. He actually made the choice to go destroy the ring, but in the end, he doesn't. He's a bit. At least he's still conflicted about it because he's not sure if that's what he actually wanted to do. And you can maybe argue, the ring itself has an influence in his decision making at some point. But
Well, certainly, as we go on into the films, then definitely.
yeah, and I think I like the fact that they just have a discussion, right? I mean, about things that matter, and Gandalf always sort of tries to look at the bright side of things, which is why he's still upbeat compared to most of the others who seem rather concerned. But and yeah,
Here we
now
are in Dwaro Dwell.
yeah, we
Like
are
an
in
old, unlit Gothic cathedral, I always think.
Khazad Dûm, yeah, and they, I mean,
Oh, Gimli.
I imagine they built all of this, right? So
Mm.
and yeah, now we get to the tomb, right? Um, and this is, I mean, I think Gimli in the first film he has much more of a nuanced character, right? In the subsequent films, he becomes more the comic relief, right?
Yeah, this is his big moment. You
Yeah,
feel the weight of his heritage, and even like we're saying, when we get in tomorrow and he's being all like, hey, like this is going to be awesome. We're going to see my relatives, and at least you see the pride of being a dwarf and what he can offer, and the acting here through all the prosthetics, the grief. It's so painful.
yeah, and he's so. I mean, looking at it now, it feels like this is yeah. If we had any other actor, we might have not gotten this, right? I mean, it's good that John Rhys Davies is portraying Gimli, right?
Oh, absolutely. He's a fantastic actor. Actually, my favorite one of his roles is in the
Indiana Jones?
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, yeah,
Great character.
because usually you wouldn't expect a character like that to be, at least that important, right?
Yeah,
Usually.
for sure.
But he's
Oh,
been in on some awful stuff, sadly, as well. So balances out. Like, wasn't it Princess Diary 2 or something? Uh,
yeah,
I'm
I didn't watch The Princess Diaries too.
no, no, but I heard about it because
Yeah, you didn't watch it
it's
really, Barrick. Don't worry.
no, because it's so spectacularly awful, I hear. So but yeah, now the head falls into the well,
Ah,
followed by the whole suit, right?
classic Pippin.
Yeah,
Classic Pippin.
clumsy,
Oh, and there we go. Yeah, it's the whole
yeah,
thing.
and everything.
And the chain. Oh, and there we go. A bit of masonry. Perfect.
I also like the shots that they basically have of mines, basically, to show that this is something that
Yeah,
everyone
that
will
this was a
probably
working
hear.
mine, right? This was a place of industry. So when you see all those winches and it's beautifully designed. It really is. And the book that Gandalf holds,
Yeah,
such a gorgeous artifact.
and you see the effort and Fulva took. That's Gandalf being rather nasty towards Pippin, but
Yeah,
uh,
but he has been a bit of a muppet there, hasn't he?
yeah, but this is actually a much more speeding up the story than it was in the books, because in the books there's a time that passes in between this incident and the moment that the orcs attack, because they're not actually sure if someone heard them or not, and here they have it immediately because obviously the story has to move along at a faster pace, and
But I
I
also
also
like it. I like the cause and effect being very direct. It's
yeah,
very dynamic.
and now we have orcs firing arrows, right? Um, but um, and we hear the troll, yeah, and they have a cave troll. Once again, something that people have been making into a meme for some reason.
I think anything Sean Bean says, right? I mean, it's just
Yeah,
his way of delivery that's like so
yeah.
deadpan as well.
It's sort of like, yeah, he's sort of like,
One does
what an annoyance.
one
They
does
have
not
a cave
simply
troll.
walk into a cave troll, you know.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, I wouldn't have wished them to encounter one immediately, right? I mean, if they walk just by surprise, like come across one, which would have been awful.
I just love the picture of Gimli standing on top of the tomb with his two axes raised, like, fuck
Yeah.
yeah. He's so awesome.
And here we have the awesome goblin costumes, right? Because that's where they still use costumes. Um,
And it's so much better, I think. I think
yeah.
in-screen effects are definitely better.
Because yeah, they're actually fighting something that's there. So and yeah, all the hobbits basically getting to fight. And yeah, actual decapitations as well. So
They're not bad, are they, really?
no,
They're in
and
the ankle biters that they are.
yeah, I mean, I mean, I would say they are not. I mean, they're already trespassing, the orcs, but at the same time, there's no one else living there anymore. So basically, they now own the place. And in the books, they're actually not fighting a troll. I mean, we see the foot, and Frodo stabs the foot, but we actually have an orc chief, I think, who basically tries to stab Frodo with a spear. And yeah, they wanted to have it be a cave troll because this is much more impressive.
So this
And
is where I kind of basically turn off in this film, pretty much until they leave the mountain and
yeah, I mean,
because in Gandalf dies, because I just kind of feel like Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, whatever. It's just another Hollywood fight scene. Well
Yeah, but
choreographed.
we had so much
Blah.
build up to I mean, at some point we had to have a fight scene because otherwise people would have said, "Well, why is this film being called, an epic when there's not much epicness going on?"
Well,
So
epic doesn't have to be about fighting. Epic can
no, no, I know, but
be,
I mean, what people conventionally consider to be epic, and yeah, yeah, I sort of agree. I mean, this at least we can still compare this to the acrobatics that Legolas does in The Hobbit, for instance.
yeah, I mean, it's still
It's like this is much more.
infinitely better than that. I mean, I don't mind big fight scenes, but I prefer them to be in the context of big battles because then I can get interested in like battle tactics and siege
Yeah,
warfare. But this kind of just random hand-to-hand melee
yeah.
is like, yeah, whatever. Smooth. If I was watching this without doing commentary, I would be fast-forwarding through all of this until we get to Galadriel, basically.
Okay, I usually like it because of the creature designs and because we haven't seen a lot of orcs in the film. So
We're gonna get so many though.
yeah,
You
but
can
we're
get
fine.
orc overload, I think.
Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, it's like we're not at that point yet. And we also see at least Aragorn stepping in, right, trying to defend Frodo against the troll.
Yeah, man.
And it's also interesting because the troll, I mean, at least from the commentaries that I heard from the director, they wanted to make the troll a bit more sympathetic in the way that he dies, because he's just like, it's like
To show the essential humanity of the troll.
it's like actually it's much more like an animal, right? Because it's so I mean it's just not really sentient. I think it's just like a stupid animal basically, and so it just acts through instinct. And yeah, now that it dies, basically they wanted to show that it was not entirely evil. That it's because the goblins basically just bring it in by a chain and everything. So I think it's actually um,
Oh, so you think it's like a slave troll, basically?
yeah, something like that. So I think it's much more like this troll didn't have a good life, and he's pretty angry about it. And so yeah, but now they're attacking it. I mean, they have to sort of like this is the moment sort of where yeah, when it sort of gives its death rattle, right? It's sort of like it's just tired and it wants to lie down. I guess it's just. I mean, to me, it always felt like there was a bit of a character to it, because otherwise, I mean, it's just as you say, it's just a fight against some faceless monsters, right? Which we
Right.
don't care about. And now we see why mithril is useful. And yeah, basically everyone sort of scared for nothing. It was a false alarm. So, and that's always stricken me as a bit of an understatement. Like this spear would have, probably killed an elephant, but not necessarily a boar. Oh, and yeah, full of surprises, Master Baggins.
Sam
And
being all Sam-like and concerned.
yeah, and now we see Shadows of Orcs again, and the Bridge of Khazad-dûm.
Just like even saying Khazad-dûm, it's hard to say it without it sounding like Crom. It's just such a cool.
Yeah,
It's just Tolkien just knows how to make languages that just sound instinctively awesome, like in how they should sound. I don't know.
yeah. It's you have to. I mean, it's not just you don't just come up with some names and then say, oh well, I'm gonna name it that. It has to make sense. It has to, and that's why I like the fact that Tolkien was very much about the linguistics and language and everything, because it has coherence within the story itself. So and now they're basically surrounded. Like this is properly epic, and
Yeah, whatever. I'm a
everyone
girl.
yeah. Oh, I don't know. Everyone looking concerned, and so now the Balrog shows up, and we see that the orcs are really, they're just subservient. They're just, they don't want any trouble, so they disappear again. Gimli sort of patting himself on the back for nothing. but we'll let it slide because it's awesome. So, oh yeah,
Also, I do want to shout out to Gimli's helmet though.
oh yeah, I like that. I mean, I like the costumes I like the costumes for the dwarves
It's,
as we
it's one of
see
my
them
favorite.
things
Yeah.
better. And then I mean, in the Hobbit, they're sort of like more cartoonish. Uh, and yeah, a Balrog, uh, which is obviously which is also you wouldn't expect them to be of the same species. Like Balrog and Gandalf are basically Maya, which is angelic spirits, basically. And yeah, so but they are of different powers and uh, so I think Gandalf himself does not necessarily think that he can take the Balrog by himself. So I guess we can probably say that one of them is a problem, but if you like in the Silmarillion have to deal with a whole horde of those things, that's actually much scarier. Um,
So, if you know about like the Silmarillion and the various power of the various creatures, is
mm,
it surprising that Gandalf beat the Balrog? Is that like against the odds,
I mean,
or should you have expected that Gandalf would?
I always took it to be like, if you want to kill the Balrog, basically there's something. I mean, it's like you basically die because they are. Um, it's not actually exactly stated like how powerful they are, but by the way that Gandalf reacts, at least in the film and in the book, it's sort of implied. And we know that Glorfindel died killing a Balrog. I mean, spoilers for anyone who hasn't read the Silmarillion yet, but yeah, I haven't seen a Balrog die without the Balrog Slayer also dying as well. So it's like they are pretty tough to beat. So and Sauron is just a Maya as well. So he's not actually of a higher order. He's just a much more powerful spirit of the same.
Okay, so it is pretty
Yes.
much 50-50 whether he's gonna kill the Balrog, and he's probably almost definitely gonna die doing it, right?
Yeah,
So
it's
it's
I
pretty
can't see
heroic then, turning back
that
to face him.
because they're creatures of shadow and fire and everything. I mean, it's I guess it would just be pretty dangerous. I mean, it's really. I'm not exactly sure, why it was that way, but still, I like the fact that it's sort of. I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, but every Balrog that we see die basically takes their foe with them. So and usually they come back from the dead as well. So like,
So they're really just freaking
Glorfindel,
annoying.
yeah,
What's
Glorfindel.
your view? They're like bed bugs in New York, like just very
No, no,
hard to get rid of.
not the Balrogs, but the people who slay the Balrog come back from.
Ah, okay, okay.
I mean, because I think they're sort of rewarded for slaying a powerful demon or something. Um, like Gandalf comes back, obviously Glorfindel also, or maybe it's a. I mean, I'm not sure if it's a different Glorfindel, but I always took it to be the same one. So
What's
we
your position on the whole? Do Balrogs fly? They have wings. What's that?
I always took it. I mean, I like the
Are Balrogs the penguins of the
have wings.
fantasy universe? So
I think I actually like I mean, I actually think it's possible that some of them have wings and some of them don't because I like to imagine that they all look different, that they all don't just look the same way. So some of them might have wings, some of them don't. But yeah, in the Silmarillion, sort of, there's a moment. I'm not. I mean, maybe we've sort of already discussed this in a VOK on one of the chapters where Melkor basically he's being strangled by Ungoliant, who's Shelob's mother, and so he screams so loud that the Balrogs hear him, and they arrive there and drive Ungoliant away. But I'm not sure they would have made it in time unless they had wings, right? I mean, unless they could fly.
so you think it's a kind of backward induction, like deduction thing? Like
Yeah.
deductively, they have to have wings, right?
I mean, it's what you want to take from it. I mean, some people say, well, they don't have wings. I mean, whatever, it's fine. I'm not adamant about it. I don't you really care one way or the other because it's about what you think they look like. So, imagination, yay. And yeah, I wouldn't want to impose I don't want to impose an image of. I just think that they should probably some of them should have wings and some of them shouldn't, but it's because then that makes it much more interesting, because then you can ask, why do some of them have wings and why do some of them not have wings, which is actually also interesting.
What's the whole kind of the flame of Arnor and the flame of Udon thing? The
Udon
Udon
is
noodles. I mean, what's that
yeah,
about?
Udon is the darkness basically.
Ah, okay.
Um, yeah, how do you say the primary darkness, the one that that was there before anything else. So
Ah, okay.
and uh, Arnor I think refers to something. I'm not. I don't recall exactly, but it refers to the Valor in some way, which if they didn't, if it wasn't in the book, I don't think they would have the rights to put this in because Christopher Tolkien basically doesn't like the films, so he wouldn't sell the rights to Silmarillion for anything. But
It's a while since I've gone back and read the Fellowship actually, so I probably should.
it's not explained in the Fellowship actually. So
But I think
unless you,
it's just like sentences like that are the
yeah,
hints at the wider world, like beyond this. The first time you read it, or the first time I read it when I was a kid, it's just an adventure story with it's like a buddy adventure,
yeah,
and then it's just like little hints and signals that there's this wider thing. And I think that's probably the first time we've seen it here. That what
because
are
it
these
refers,
dark forces, these elemental things?
because it refers to maybe also system of belief, right? Because they believe, the Valar they are gods, are the gods of Middle Earth, basically. So it's it suggests that this is a much larger society, that there are much larger societies within this that believe in certain things and have certain words for them that we are not given an explanation to. So and yeah, now everyone is sad because Gandalf just died, basically.
It's what I call the Pearl Harbor moment where Legolas sort of looks off into the distance like Ben Affleck with a sort of cheesy sort of, oh, I'm so forlorn look.
This is much better than Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, but I think there is some of the acting in this
Of
particular scene
course.
which I think is verging
Yeah,
on the kind
my
of
brother always
cliched.
thought that maybe the tear was a fake one, so I'm not sure.
Single tear.
Yeah, and then Aragorn basically
I have to say,
looking.
Boromir doesn't look that upset.
No, but he didn't. If you know what Denethor thinks of Gandalf, you probably know what Boromir thinks of Gandalf. So, and yeah, they cut a. Their production photos of the Orcs of Moria coming out of Moria, and following them into the woods, getting killed by the elves in the process, which they haven't even included in the extended edition, which at the time I found really upsetting, because I thought, well, we've seen these photos since before the films, the theatrical versions actually got released, and we're never gonna see this sequence, which I find really sad.
Oh,
But yeah, now Kate Blanchett's all powerful eyes.
yeah, this is where I stopped fast forwarding. I love this
Yeah.
shit. I love after that sort of trauma, the sort of the hilarity of meeting the elves and then like dissing Gimli.
Yeah,
So brilliant.
but yeah, Gimli obviously eyes of the hog and ears of a fox. Okay. Yeah, that was refuted rather quickly. So
That would be me though. That would if
uh,
I was on this trip, I would be the cocky one. Well, number one, I'd be in charge of sausages and swords, evidently. But I
uh,
would also be the one like, yeah, come to my parents' place. It's like awesome. No, and then I'd be like, yes, I am so stealth. I have superpowers, and like some elf would be
uh,
like, yeah, shut the fuck
yeah,
up,
someone would just
diss me
just go
completely.
over. But yeah, and this scene is also where we get a little bit of dwarfish language. Um, and yeah, also it's a bit presumptuous and arrogant of the elves to sort of presume that everyone speaks Elvish, right?
Yeah, they're
And
like the Americans. You will speak
the
English, right? Yeah.
yeah, that sort of thing. Um, and Yeah, we're not privy to what Gimli says to them, but it's not something nice, I guess. Uh,
No, no, not at all.
and yeah, they. I mean, I can understand why they don't want to. I mean, why they don't want to let them go further, but at the same time, in the theatrical version, it's sort of. Um, I don't know. It would be a bit abrupt, I would say, if you got from the elves meeting them to them bringing them immediately to Galadriel, even though they're carrying the ring, right? So this is, I find, is much more interesting because we're also given Frodo looking at everyone because he's not sure who to trust at this point. Because I mean, he's sort of lost. I mean, that's a classical hero journey.
Oh, for sure. This is like such a trope now. I mean,
yeah, it's a trope, but I think this works rather well because it doesn't make you feel like it is the typical hero journey. I mean, you can see it, but it's not. But that's not the focus. The focus is not necessarily on Frodo alone, right? There are other people here who are relevant and who are given perspective. So it doesn't.
and they have to be, right, because as
Yeah.
we go into Two Towers and the people are split, if only Frodo had a narrative arc and had a journey of character, it
Yeah.
would be it would not succeed, and Merry has his personal journey and so does Pippin, and they separate, and that's what I love. That's the richness, and that's why I think in a way maybe Gimli and Legolas do stand out, because they don't really have that. Their personal journey
No.
is just to sort of stop being racist, basically.
Yeah. And
Um,
Nicholas basically, he gets to fall in love with the sea, but that's basically. No, but it's true. Like he's constantly saying,
so
"Oh, I want
dismissive.
to go back to the sea, under the sea." Um, and yeah, this is I mean, would you rather live here or in Rivendell? Question mark.
Well, definitely Rivendell looks way more awesome than this. The architecture is much nicer. It's all gothic and beautiful, whereas this is basically just a giant Wookiee treehouse.
Oh,
This is like
right.
Endor, basically.
Yeah, and this is too bright. I mean, I wouldn't be able to sleep with all those lights. So
But don't
uh,
they have nighttime? They have nighttime.
yeah, they don't. Yeah, and so now, I mean, I'm sort of feeling like a bit sad for Celeborn here, uh,
Why? Because
because
he's like
he's
a
yeah,
submissive husband.
like you know who's wearing the pants in this relationship. Come on.
And maybe he's happy with that. Maybe he's happy to be in this
Yeah,
subservient role.
yeah, he is, I guess, because but
I mean,
I
he's been with her a long time if he's not happy.
yeah,
He should have issued divorce papers centuries ago if he weren't.
yeah, he's not gonna dare write divorce papers in it.
Yeah, the divorcing wrath of Galadriel. That'd be hilarious.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, I would be awesome to see the elves like look angry, but we haven't seen that yet. So, and I mean, Kate Blanchett, I'm always amazed. Like she hasn't aged that much. I mean, she doesn't look much older now than she did then, right? I mean, at least from what I see. I mean, when you look at Blue Jasmine, I mean, it's astonishing that she. I mean, she just. I mean,
It's hard to tell though with Hollywood actresses, isn't it? Because you never
yeah,
know whether they've had very good light Botox and Juvederm. So,
yeah.
but I think she just does start off just being very beautiful, and yeah. But I mean, she wasn't that young here either, so maybe she just sort of reached that point where she was going to look how she looks. I don't know.
It's a long time since she's played Elizabeth, though. Which I mean,
Oh no, she's properly young in Elizabeth.
yeah, she looked like a teenager in that one, which I always find interesting because
That's a
she's
great
always,
film.
yeah.
Are
And
you into your Tudor history?
no, sadly not. I mean, I know like I know like the outlines, like Tudors, War of the Roses. That's basically it. So
There's a new TV series coming out in the UK
oh
for Wolf Hall, which I saw the preview of on Wednesday night, which is really good. I don't know if it'll make it to Belgium, but it's well worth looking out for if you can get hold of it.
yeah, I will. I'll try to find it. And I'm always just I think this was not too much after Elizabeth, right? I mean, at least the Fellowship of the Ring. Well, I mean,
When
uh,
was Elizabeth?
Elizabeth, I think, was 98, wasn't it? Or my
Oh,
1990.
okay. In that case, it's really back to
Mm.
yeah, it's really back to back.
And yeah, and I like how her voice changes here because she's more menacing now. We are not sure at this point, at least, if she's evil or not. If you haven't read the books, you don't know exactly if she hasn't some ill purpose, and then she doesn't.
I love the way she makes
Yeah.
Sean Bean cower. And what I love about her power, it's this very quiet sort of. She's so convincing as someone who just looks right through you and sees everything. Like you've got nowhere to hide.
Yeah. And my mother,
Perfect casting.
when I watch the films, like my mother usually says, this is the point where she sort of feels like, they're maybe a bit of overacting because some of her delivery feels like a bit melodramatic. So
Really?
she says everything. But I just,
What when she's doing the
I
sort of the evil being tested Galadriel, or even in this bit?
yeah, I mean, she says, in general, she thinks in a lot of the Rings films, like they're delivering, all these lines with so much gravitas, and
No, I definitely think that's the case in some parts, and
yeah.
there's definitely that sort of self-consciously epic feel. But I wouldn't
But it's
necessarily have put this scene as the culprit.
yeah, not necessarily. I mean, I don't necessarily think that. So it's so some people have different impressions of this film. So I can, but I can see where the criticism can come from. So but yeah, I mean, this is a nice scene as well, like between Boromir and Aragorn, especially because you don't necessarily see a scene like this. Between, I mean, they don't like each other in the book at this point, at least.
No, no.
So I mean, it's also because I mean, Boromir in the book, he's not
Oh, this is
that
a particularly
pathetic.
douchey line from Legolas. I can't tell you the sadness of the song. For me, the grief is too much to bear. Like, yeah, you guys all have your little grief, but mine is just epic because I'm an
Oh,
elf.
yeah. I'm I'm thinking
Such a
back to
douchebag.
yeah. Well, he's not. I mean, he's unaware of it, which is a bigger problem. But yeah,
Yeah,
if he was
self-awareness not being a
conscious,
big thing for elves.
if he was consciously a douchebag, I would be less forgiving.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Sorry, I interrupted.
yeah, Boromir is basically the douchebag too in the book, and in the film, he's much more nuanced. And the thing is that that's due to some of the scenes not being directly from the book, right, and sort of being changed to make him more sympathetic. And I mean, I mean, understandable in the way that he acts because, at least in the book, he's sort of openly antagonistic towards, I mean, against Aragorn. Sort of the idea, basically, that someone else could be the ruler of Gondor would be intolerable. But here, it's sort of like he seems to accept at least the fact that his father is not perfect and is not universally loved by everyone. So he's sort of aware, at least, of
Yeah, he's a
what the
much more
problems are.
sympathetic figure and actually just tragic here. I mean, the weight of the world is on his shoulders. The weight of defending the West from Mordor, knowing, oh, it's just heartbreaking. I mean, this is a real cry for help from a guy who's ultimately a threat to him. Aragorn is a threat to his position, but
Yeah.
and you get the genuine love of Minas Tirith here there. When
Yeah,
he
which we won't
describes it
see
as
until
it's
the
kind of like the city of the hill, it's mythic and beautiful.
yeah, which we won't see until the third movie. So they have teased us since then. But
Yeah. It's almost like he's at his most Faramir here.
yeah,
Because Faramir is always the one in the books who speaks of, the glory of what used to be, and it's you see them as brothers now, I think.
and that's also why I think um, I mean, the end of the film wouldn't be as powerful as it is if it wasn't believable that Boromir would absolutely go this far to prevent the evil that he sees.
Oh,
If
absolutely, absolutely.
if it wouldn't come across, I mean, if it wasn't well told as a story in the film, you wouldn't believe it.
Yeah, you have to sympathize with Boromir. You have to realize that he loves his city and his people.
Yeah.
That's what makes it forgivable. That he'll do whatever's necessary to save it, to bring this mighty weapon.
Yeah. And here we have the mirror of Galadriel.
Yeah, I suppose here you might think she's mincing about a bit, which is a bit overacting-y, but
No, that's
you
not.
know, how do you act like an elf? I mean, it's going to be a bit ridiculous,
It's
isn't
sort of
it?
all emotions. No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how you are. I mean, the elves in the Hobbit are basically they're pranking. They're sort of jolly. At least when I read, I mean, I always when I come to that chapter, it's always like they're always singing, always dancing, always like they're I mean, at least that's showing somewhat of some emotions, right? I mean, they're uh, actually pretty likable people. But then in a lot of rings, you sort of get the much more detached and ethereal aspects to them. And yeah, Galadriel basically, who's so old and has seen so many things. Basically, it's like you sort of go, yeah, there's awfulness in the world. Like, what's next? Can I get an evil eye in my mirror? Yes, we can. um, and
Like it's a party trick.
oh yeah,
But this is pretty scary.
but
I mean, I think the first time you watch this, especially if you haven't read the books, this is pretty freaking sinister stuff.
yeah, and when I mean, because you're aware that this is, I mean, at least now you're aware what the consequences are. I mean, it's sort of not entirely made clear until this point. It's not shown like this will affect everyone.
Yeah, this is the stakes. This is the scene where
Yeah.
the stakes of this movie are totally laid out. Like, this isn't some parochial, we're off to fight Saruman thing. This is
Yeah.
big and epic.
Mm. And it once again puts the emphasis on Sauron, which is, some people tend to overlook. I mean, some people say, well, because Christopher Lee is so much in the foreground as Saruman, that he sort of takes
This is
over.
the burning of the Shire, the razing of the Shire that didn't happen.
Yeah, I think this is sort of maybe a sort of to sneak it in somewhere because otherwise you won't have it. Because
I mean, did Peter Jackson know already at this point that he wasn't going to have that?
I don't know. But I mean, they did all three movies, but I mean, they filmed them simultaneously, right? So I think this.
Oh, okay, so he had to know from the start.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
okay.
they would have filmed scenes from the third movie at the beginning, or maybe in the middle, and then they would have gone to movie one and movie two and all that stuff. So they would have had to. I mean, it's really difficult to make the Scouring of the Shire work in a 3-act structure of a film because basically you have these world-shattering events, and then you have to spend another 20, 30 minutes on getting these ruffians out of your.
I mean, that's the point, right? Like, basically, it's a 4-act book, so you have 3 acts to the destruction of the ring, and then there's a whole nother act.
Yeah. Which I mean, I think it works in the book. It wouldn't work in a film.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, they make a point. I mean, at least in the third film, they make the point that they are sort of changed and that they sort of don't belong. I mean, they don't belong with these people necessarily who have no worries about anything. So it's sort of we understand we understand what we had to go through, but these people don't, which is actually very reminiscent of what World War One experience was like. I mean, people who came back from World War One basically. They said, you don't know what we had to do, and we don't know, what horrors we had to face, etc. So you could be here and enjoy your bourgeois lifestyle, basically. And
Well, really, after any war, right? I mean, it's such a transformative experience and so hard to convey to the people left behind.
And this about the origin of the orcs is also a debated point because we don't necessarily know where they came from. They chose, for the movie, they went with the most likely theory that they were elves that are made.
Oh, I thought we knew that. I thought that was canon, that they're sort of messed up elves.
It's actually debated among people who actually who read everything, and so they're not entirely.
So what are the alternative theories then?
That they are at the very first orcs were maybe corrupted elves, but afterwards they were also that Matthieu basically also used men. And made them into orcs and all that stuff. So I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
Once the men woke up, when they came, because they came after the elves, then that would probably also be part of the stock that would be made into orcs, I guess. And in the movie, they just say that it's elves. But I'm also commenting on this because this is also about where do the Uruk-hai come from? Because the Uruk-hai are basically, in the movies, they basically are Saruman's army because we never see any Uruk-hai on Sauron's front, but which is actually wrong because in the at least in the extended Tolkien universe, it's sort of accepted that Sauron made the Uruk-hai, and they
Oh, okay.
invaded Gilead first, which is why it got destroyed like a long time ago, and it was always since then kind of a uh, outpost, basically, like an area that would be full of conflict, basically. I mean the the only thing that singles out the Uruk-hai from other orcs is that the Uruk-hai can withstand sunlight. So
I mean, the
and
way they describe it here, that the elves were tortured and mutilated, just makes it sound like you should have
yeah,
sympathy for the orcs, because basically
yeah,
they're sort of
no,
they're
that's
kind of
true.
war victims in a way or something.
Yeah, which is why I don't get the idea that people say, the orcs are irredeemable, because Tolkien himself doesn't necessarily say that. We never focus on the orcs. We're never given any viewpoint. I mean, we know a bit in the third book where we sort of see Gorbak and Shagrat fighting over different things, right? And they sort of seem to be casual in their interactions. So it's sort of like, yeah, they also have a society. It's a different society.
Oh my god, that "you will taste man" flesh line. That's so
Yeah,
disgusting.
but that's how you get them to fight. Which is, I mean, it's something that yeah, I don't know what you. I mean, it's not cannibalism because they're not from the same species, right? But they are.
It's not good.
No, they basically will eat anything. They will eat horses. They will eat people and all other sorts of things. And
Anyway, back
this
to
is
some
why
lovely elfish
nice
stuff.
lembas bread. Like after the man flesh line, we get lembas bread.
Lembas blood and all good elvish things. Oh, so
Yeah.
cute.
But yeah, I after a while I would just get bored eating that sort of thing.
Yeah, but if you're starving, man, I mean, it's like...
We also missed the joke where Pippin basically, talked about eating four.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
Legolas only needs to eat like parts of one, right? And he says, "Yeah,
for
I'm
weeks.
fed." The hobbits don't care.
The Hobbit's like, man, I haven't had second breakfast since we left home.
Yeah, it's like we haven't seen them have breakfast since.
And there was not a sausage. Like,
Yeah.
seriously. Like,
No, not
are
one.
elves
Not one
basically
sausage
vegetarian?
today.
Do elves eat meat? Are elves vegetarian?
Oh, I don't know. I guess they would probably eat air. I don't know how they sustain themselves. It's
Oh,
like, yeah, they
hilarious.
won't lembas bread. They probably just eat the finer things in life.
Yeah.
And Gimli, this is a good scene with Gimli getting a bit more development, right? Where he asks for her hair.
He's in
is a
love
big
with an
point.
elf.
Yeah, which is a big point in the books and is never brought up again in the films. But yeah, that's also. I mean, that's also something that endears him to Legolas, at least in the extended version of the films, and in the books. I think is because he tells him, right. And I don't know why exactly we're talking about Arwen again, unless it's to further the love story, because they had to make it a love story for Aragorn, because otherwise he just comes across as a bit of a I don't know, a self-assured hero with not many flaws, which is not interesting. Oh, and here we have,
The goodbye messages.
yeah. And I like it. I mean, that at the end there, she talks to him in Elvish. Yeah. And it's also a bit. I mean, it's obviously telegraphing what is going to happen in the next films, but at the same time, it's also taking time to discuss what Aragorn's role is in all of this, which is
Yeah.
important. And Frodo Baggins, yeah, Light of Arendelle, which in the Silmarillion will become important. Arendelle is a name that is basically, super, super important.
So what is the, like, I never got it, sort of,
Oh,
in this little jar, is that, like, just literally light? I mean,
it's light from their most beloved star, and their most beloved star basically has the light of one of the Silmaril.
Oh, okay, so this is like Silmaril power.
Yeah, basically. It's basically the light of the summer that he has with him there. So
Cool.
it's really, I mean, for people who have read the Silmarillion, this would be pretty big.
Okay.
But I know it's because like these three jewels that hundreds of years in this world they fought wars over, uh, actually coming back in the Lord of the Rings, which are also about, just don't make jewels, people. It's like don't manufacture any kind of jewelry in this world
Is
because
that the
people
basic
want to
fundamental
take them.
lesson that jewelry is bad? Because I don't think that's really a message that I can
Yeah.
agree with.
Oh no, okay. Some jewelry is definitely good. Some is
Jewelry you get from
neutral.
Cartier good. Jewelry you make yourself as an
Yeah.
elf bad.
Some is unaligned. Some jewelry is unaligned, and some is definitely lawful evil. For I don't know. And yeah, here we get this. I mean, I have to say again, like some of the themes are pretty awesome, like music themes, and I like I mean, the sort of machine like industrial music for the Urkai.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It's because it conveys immediately what these characters, what these guys are about. And yeah, Legolas basically sees them, but because we haven't, I mean, I don't know, I'm not sure how you convey like the fact that Legolas can see like miles and miles away, unless you, I mean, because the elves are good, have really good eyesight, so I'm not sure exactly how you would otherwise convey that I mean, because you would have to explain why he's so good at shooting arrows at some point. Mm. And this is another extended scene that we didn't get in the theatrical version, where they're talking about Gollum again, because he follows them, and that's something that I think Sam says to Frodo, right? He says that
Yeah, and I think it's important, right? Because you've got to see that chain of how he's come from Moria and how he ends
but
up tracking them. Because otherwise, he kind of appears out of nowhere on the east side of the river, kind of thing.
yeah, I mean, but the fact that at least with the cinematic versions we had a year in between the films, it's sort of easy for people to fill in the blanks, right? They sort of say, oh well, he just followed them probably, and yeah, it's also like the ring is starting to have some influence probably on Frodo because he's not sleeping and eating. So and it's also good to have Sam's character getting a bit more depth here because
Mm.
um,
But I love these
he's yeah,
scenes.
comprehending. I think that he can't deal with all of Frodo's problems, right? So
Yeah, it's also him, like, if what happened with Galadriel was for us to learn the stakes and for Frodo to truly understand the scope, I think there's also a process of Sam realizing that too.
yeah, he has to at some because it's otherwise it's not really. I mean, the message is conveyed to us, but the characters have to actually know it too. They have to show us that they know it.
Absolutely.
Um, and yeah, here Boromir making the last desperate plea to Aragorn, and yeah, uh, but this is really, I mean, what he's saying here is actually different from what Boromir in the books would say, because Boromir in the books doesn't actually want to acknowledge uh, that there is any legitimacy to Aragorn's claims. So
Oh yeah, it's far more hostile, but
yeah,
also because in the books Aragorn is a lot more certain that he wants to make the claim, so
yes,
he's a much bigger threat. Whereas here, he's still
hmm
vacillating, he's still hesitant about even declaring it. So there's room for there to be, in a sense, more collaboration.
hmm that's why I mean it's fine that they changed Aragorn's character for the film, but it has an influence on how the other characters interact with him. So it makes sense. It's not just like um, Boromir like be saying like, oh, you just you want to claim your birthright and everything, which I don't acknowledge and everything. When Aragorn in the film shows nothing like that at all. So that would feel a bit out of place, basically. I mean, it just wouldn't fit. So if you change Aragorn's character, you have to change the way people react to Aragorn. So and yeah, we missed the big statues, which I always find really impressive. Like, I mean, I haven't seen the first two films in the cinema, but this makes me regret that decision because it's like the scale of everything.
Oh, it's beautiful. I mean,
Um,
I've seen them on IMAX, and I even saw them all through the night. They did like them back to back on extended edition in IMAX, so it started at sort of 6 in the evening and finished at sort of 6 in the morning, and
oh wow!
that was amazing. And the sound system is so good at the BFI IMAX at Audley that I always remember in particular the scene where they're standing on the battlements of Helm's Deep and
Oh yeah,
waiting,
yeah.
and the troops start kind of thumping their feet in the ground, and just that sound was just all encompassing and amazing.
Bestest battle ever.
Yeah,
Um,
it is the best battle ever.
and yeah, basically Gimli giving advice. And yeah, so Pippin sort of just being like the straight guy in the joke here.
Yeah. And the Argonauts, I love this. This is exactly why I love these books. These wonderful, noble, old, beautiful relics of nobility. Oh, this
Yeah,
is the world I want to live in. I want to live in a world where I can sail down a river and see the Argonaut.
yeah. You want this to be like in our like ruins that no one has visited, like in the woods
And the
somewhere.
scale, like when they show the boat going past the toe, like it's just so massive.
Yeah, it's incredible. And just because you said that you watched the extended editions in the cinema, does it make a difference if you watch everything like in one go, or does it improve the experience, or is it
Yeah,
much more exhausting?
definitely. It's all encompassing. I mean, I wish they'd started at 10 in the morning and finished at 10 at night because it was just really, it was painful doing it during the night. But it does. It really does. Because you see certain of the minor characters it really benefits, where there are just little scenes, little moments that they have, and you see the development more clearly.
Hmm.
But yeah, I would really recommend it. And if you've never seen the films on
I
a
hope
big
that
screen, I mean, it's definitely worth trying to make an effort for it.
I hope that they project it in my independent cinema at some point. I'm always looking out for that because I never seen them in the cinema, especially the extended editions. So at some point I definitely want to be able to do that. But we probably should be talking about what Boromir is doing here, sort of like this. I mean, it's at first he's understanding, and so now he's questioning, and now he's becoming much more passive aggressive in a way. I mean, in a way that he interacts with Frodo here.
I mean,
And
the hold on him, I think the desperation is certainly stronger as you near Mordor, and certainly stronger as he spends more time with the ring. But I've
yeah,
always wondered if it gets stronger as you get nearer Minas Tirith, because
oh,
he's nearer the thing that he wants to save, so his
oh,
need for the ring is greater.
that's definitely an element. I think it definitely plays into it because he's much more aware of that. He's so close to what he actually wants, and so um, now he's sort of got the opportunity because no one else is around. So he's trying to get the ring from Frodo, um, and yeah, Frodo just disappears. And what I think is interesting is that he basically continues being under the influence of at least the ring in this. I mean, or maybe it's just the frustration and the sentiment that he's shared since the beginning, because he probably also feels that Frodo is not the right person uh, to carry this. So he doesn't believe in the strength of the smaller people, which is sort of why he wants to take the ring for himself. And in the book, it's sort of, it feels that much more like he's waking up from a madness that has overcome him. Whereas here you can basically see that the whole time he's sort of been holding it back a little, right? Uh,
Yeah, absolutely.
and yeah,
And I
now
think in a way, this is more plausible and credible to me.
yeah, of course.
I think Boromir was always wanted it, and in a way, I don't want to blame him for that. I think in terms of his worldview and the limited worldview that he has, it makes sense, and he doesn't understand why other people don't see it the same way. And I've just got so much sympathy for him here.
Yeah,
And also because Sean Bean's performance, I think, when he realizes what he's done, when Frodo puts it on and runs away, and he sort of breaks free, and then starts defending the other hobbits, you can see so much guilt and so much need to defend them as
Yeah,
a kind of recompense to Frodo.
to
Like, he
redeem
needs
himself.
to recapture his sense of his own nobility, that he does know what the right thing is to do. So
Mm.
I've got a lot of respect for Boromir by the end of it.
And I would like to know what you think of the scene between Aragorn and Frodo, because in the books, Frodo doesn't interact with anyone. But I think it's a nice closing point for the film. I think if he gets to talk to people who we know are relevant to his story later on, because we have to see. I mean, at least we have to know that Aragorn is not going to be tempted by the ring. At least here, so we have to know that. I think for people who haven't read the books, obviously, it's a nice way of saying that Aragorn is not going to be tempted, and he's a nice contrast to Boromir in the previous scene. So,
Yep.
I that's at least how I take it. I'm not sure if you like the fact that Frodo basically he gets to see Merry and Pippin when they're chased by the orcs, and yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
I don't mind it. I mean, I'm not. Yeah.
because some people might say, "Well, this was not in the books," and
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not one of those people. I mean, there are some things that on it. I never too much mind about the additions that they've put in. Like, I don't mind when the elves turn up at Helm's Deep. I don't. I mean, I think it's a bit silly, but I don't too much mind when Arwen turns up at Weathertop or after Weathertop. But I get more upset at the things that are taken out in general. So, like,
if
not
they,
Saruman at the end. That's the only one I get genuinely feel upset about. The rest is kind of okay for me.
okay, yeah, I can see that. I mean, it's to me, it's just I'm probably much more indulgent. I mean, I'm much more forgiving with the changes that they make because I watched the films first. So I sort of, I think I owe it to. I mean, there's probably a sense of like I think I owe it to the films for sort of introducing me to the books, in a way, that I'm probably not as harsh on changes. From the original source material, like I mean, for example, you said the battle in Mines of Moria is basically an action scene, and
Yeah.
I mean the films are much more like action films, obviously, because they are not necessarily about. I mean, they're not necessarily entirely about the world building and they
But I
have
think
to.
it's the difference. There's action and action. So in general, I don't like just random sort of fight action. But even if it's well choreographed. So I've never been much into martial arts films, but I do love big because I just love military history. So any battle where it looks like it's army against army, then
Yeah.
I really love it. So and then sort of hand-to-hand combat within that, I
I
also really love. So it's kind of weird, I guess.
And I like this one because here we see the characters making choices as it goes along, right? So it has much more of an urgency and there's much more importance as to what is going to happen next, right? I mean, it's nice fight choreography, but if Frodo didn't make these choices to basically leave, for example, Merry and Pippin behind, it wouldn't feel as important. I think it would just be another fight scene.
Yeah,
And
agree.
we have, and we basically see that that Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli are very good at fighting, basically. And yeah, now we basically have the cavalry to the rescue.
We get to see Aragorn
Yeah.
flinging his sword around, being all like Aragorn-y.
This is where I think the influences of I think the Roland story, where the knight who fought for
Or the
Charlemagne.
Chanson de Roland.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I think this is where the elements probably come from, like the horn, the horn that he's blowing, and the fact that it's cut in half once he's done and everything. I think I mean some of the influences are
And the
rather.
fighting amidst the medieval ruins, and
Yeah.
it is beautiful, I have to say.
And to tie it back to maybe A Song of Ice and Fire, I think you remember in season 3 where Theon is in the woods, right?
He was
Being
like
chased.
in the woods forever, being tortured right now.
Yeah, he was in the where he was basically being chased through the woods, like, and Ramsay basically comes and saves him. I I think this is probably an homage to this, because there's someone
Oh,
shooting
okay.
arrows to people in the woods, right? And someone gets saved, but it's probably a much more a darker twist on it, I guess, because we know that it's not good for Theon. So and yeah, bit of Hobbit stone throwing, which they make a point of in the books. Hobbits are good at throwing stones,
But
right?
are they? I mean, is there any actual like evidence for that?
Oh, Sam throws an apple at Bill in Bree, right?
Yeah, but I mean, like, but it's not a thing, is it? It
No,
just
no,
happens once.
no. It's. I guess I just noticed it. I mean, there was a sentence in the book that said when a hobbit takes a stone and throws it, it's. I guess I just was under the impression that hobbits were really good at it.
Okay.
Yeah, and here we get basically San Sebastian.
Oh, it's so Catholic. I love it.
Yeah, we get all of the references. And this is actually sad, where he can't basically even reach the horn again.
Yeah.
And yeah,
This has to be one of the best death scenes in the whole
oh
trilogy, right? I mean,
yeah, this is
no one gets as much
yes.
individual time. I suppose not many of the good guys die in this, actually, but
Oh,
even if you
yeah,
take into account The Hobbit as well, so you have all 6 movies, this has to be one of the most cool deaths.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd say the other one that comes to mind is Theoden, obviously.
Yeah,
Like
but it's not as long drawn out. I mean, yeah, he does have a good death, though.
no, but you see, like, I mean, it's at least I think the use of slow motion is actually what makes it much more tragic. I think because it makes it
True.
a long drawn out moment. Like you want it at some point, you want the poor guy to get a break, right? You don't you don't want it to be too long. Uh,
Yeah, it's pretty painful.
and yeah, now the hobbits get kidnapped, and yeah, they basically just ignore him because they're not here for Boromir. So uh, yeah, which is efficiency. Um, and so yeah, I guess I mean, because I hear that from everyone. Like people cheer whenever this guy gets it,
Why?
when he gets beheaded. Like when Aragorn gets.
Seriously?
Yeah, I think
Is
people
that like a
cheer.
thing?
I think Orlando Bloom said in the cinema, like when he was watching the film and the guy got decapitated, people were cheering
That's a
because
bit
he killed
harsh.
Boromir before, and so people were invested in
I think
this guy.
the only time I've seen like visceral reaction cinema is when Eowyn
Oh
does
no, the
the
Lich King.
yeah, that definitely
Oh
gets applause, I think.
yeah, and this is I don't know why they removed this. He's just basically licking his own blood, right? I mean, it's his blood, so.
Yeah, exactly. Why is that a big
It's
deal?
black blood. I mean, I also know. I mean, I hear that if you basically have black colored or green colored blood, it's not. I mean, it's not likely to get as likely to get cut.
Yeah, because it's fantasy, so
Yeah.
fantasy violence won't be treated as harshly as real violence. So the
Hmm.
concept from the censuses is that if kids are watching it, if it doesn't look real, then they'll just think it's like, yeah, you get away with more, put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always amazed that these films got a PG-13 rating. Basically, I mean, they were for 12. I mean, they at least where I live, they were for 12-year-olds and upwards. Um,
Yeah, but I think the thing is, it's
it's
violence, not sex, and therefore,
yeah,
violence is treated better
yeah.
than sex.
I mean, but here in
Also, I think they will have, I'm sure, because the studio will have wanted these to be PG-13 movies, they need to go for that teenage audience and the young kid audience. So I'm
well, big
sure they
cities
lobbied
lobby for
very
that.
hard to say this is fantasy violence. It's not the same as, modern war battles. So I'm sure
Yeah,
that was part of it. And it's not
which
guns, it's swords.
yeah, but it's still to me it I don't know. Yeah, I feel like if people take the consequences of violence out of the equation, then showing violence is not gonna deliver the message that violence is inherently uh that it basically hurts people. I mean that people get hurt and people and it ruins people's lives. So I usually when there's lots of people shooting at something in a film and no one gets hurt, like even though like or even then, if people like shoot at Arnold Schwarzenegger and he like takes 5 or 6 bullets in the chest and he's still going, right? It's I don't know. I sort of have a bit of an issue with that sort of thing because it's disingenuous, I think.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
But some films are meant to be fun, so I guess it depends. And here we have the death scene, obviously, which we talked over, but it's actually, it's just, but it's yeah. What can we say that we haven't said already about Boromir? Basically, it's yeah. The guy basically has a real arc within the hour and a half that he's in the film. So I like the fact that he's not. I mean, he's not the main character, but he has one of the most noticeable changes happening.
Yeah, so, absolutely. But I mean, similarly, just as Jaime is not the main character in Song of Ice and Fire, but he has one of the most important arcs. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe he does turn into one of the most important characters. What do I know?
Yeah, we probably haven't read all the books yet. So
yeah.
And yeah, Frodo basically holding out the ring, because he's basically thinking things over. And I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not because there's a voiceover here. Would you say that generally, if you want to make a film, like if you want to have multiple characters express their thoughts without voicing them out loud, would you say that giving different characters a voiceover like this one do you think that's the way to go usually?
It's tricky because I think voiceover, there are certain cinematic techniques that go in and out of fashion and can easily date a movie. And actually, Wolf Hall, that was a good example where that whole novel is very technically done from the perspective of the protagonist, Thomas Cromwell, and the adapters had said, should we, use voiceover to, convey that on TV? And the director said, I chose not to because it's very out of fashion and it feels almost 80s. So I think, actually sometimes I think it probably is, and you could use a bit more of that, but it is perhaps wrongly seen as very dated.
Yeah, but let's say, I mean, if you're
Aragorn and Boromir being all kind of like, I would have followed you, oh captain, my captain.
Yeah.
It's the Dead Poet Society moment.
Yeah, been a long time since I've seen that one.
But it's a nice reconciliation, and it shows that Aragorn will tell not a white lie, but he's got compassion enough to actually mask the situation and let a man die a good death or a peaceful death, in a way.
Yeah. And here we have Sam drowning, I think. And this is maybe it looks a bit fake, where he's underwater because you wouldn't be able to see him that clearly. And yeah, basically he's drowning already.
But I don't know how it works.
Probably it's the hand. It's the fact that the hand, Frodo's hand, is basically the way that it's coming into the water. It sort of looks a bit fake, but apart from that, it's really.
I think you're ahead of me by about a minute and a half.
Oh, could be. Yeah, they're in the boat right now.
Whereas I'm just got Frodo on the seashore, sort of lakeshore riverbank, deciding to swim across, and Sam running down to meet him. Which is weird, because I'm watching, for listeners, if you're wondering about sync issues, I am watching on the version of the extended edition downloaded from iTunes on my iPad, so maybe it's slightly different from the DVD version. Shouldn't be.
Oh no!
But it feels like that up until this point we've been perfectly synced, so maybe at the death of Boromir I feel like I had an extra minute or something.
Oh, I think it's probably because when they were in the mines, my computer sort of stopped for a short time, so I sort of, to catch up, I sort of put it forward a bit.
Okay.
But until now we didn't have a problem.
Yeah, which seems weird.
I'm just gonna wait because I'm here where they're hugging, so I'm.
Okay, I'll let you know when we're at the hug.
Yeah. So, where are you at?
So I'm at the bit where Frodo's kind of thinking, oh, should I go? Should I stay? And then he's remembering dead Gandalf telling him it's what you do with the time that's given you. You're not free to choose your time, which I think makes him think, well, screw
Which is
it. If
also,
this is my mission, then I have to go.
which is also, I mean, these films are not topical in the sense that they are about an issue. They're not issue films, I think. They are about, that's why I like them so much, because they are still relevant. It's like, people can watch, whenever things get, dark and depressing, like politically or even, on other on other levels of life. I think it's always good to remember, like, you don't choose your the era that you live in, right? You basically have to make
So,
the best of what is
yeah.
coming
So
your way.
now I've got little Sam drowning.
No,
Oh, this bit of the movie, I have to admit, does typically, there's a tear in my eye because
yeah,
I just love Sam and Frodo. I love Sam. He's such a good
yeah,
guy.
yeah. Yeah. That's the friendship that we talked about in the first part as well,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is obviously a big part of the story, and which people for some reason interpreted as homoerotic. I don't know.
Yeah, out of context. It's an anachronistic thing to think.
I mean,
Okay,
even
now Frodo's pulling him back into the boat. Soggy Sam.
yeah,
And now they're hugging. So I
yeah,
think we're back in business.
yeah, we are.
I made a promise, Mr. Frodo.
Oh, no.
Don't
Uh,
you leave him, Samwise Gamgee. Aw, that's so cute.
yeah,
I just think it's tough. Like, we've been discussing before this podcast began the sort of the events of this week in Paris, and it's sometimes, maybe it's seen as escapism to watch fantasy, but sometimes you need to see an act of genuine purity and kindness and nobility to make you realize that it's
yeah.
not so hopeless, in a sense.
No, that's true. I mean, because in a fantasy world, you can basically have any kind of. I mean, it's a different setting, and so you
Yeah, for
can
sure.
have any kind of problems, and you can make a commentary on current events or something. But it's always best to have a timeless story, I think, that can survive the test of time. And this is definitely one of those. And so now Legolas trying to, at least thinking of going after the hobbits first, but yeah, Aragorn, he's
But
yeah,
it's a nice impulse in Legolas, at
yeah,
least.
because obviously that's where they would go, right? And that's where you they were bound to Mount Doom with Frodo and Sam, but it's also a bit sad that the Fellowship has failed within the Fellowship of the Ring, because afterwards, yeah, because in the book, obviously, this is where books 1 and book 2 get adapted into the first film, right? I mean, this is the first couple of chapters, or the first chapter in the Two Towers, obviously, but it's a nice segue into the second film.
And I think they had to do it this way, right? Because they
Yeah,
had to. They
it's
couldn't end the way
yeah,
the books end, which is just utterly morose, and then just leave you there for a year. I mean,
yeah,
I
that
think
would
this is right, and I think Aragorn's decision is right. That
yeah,
the Fellowship was only a Fellowship as long as it went, and Frodo's mission doesn't. It's the little guy, doesn't need these guys. So
yeah. He
I think
basically
it comes across worse in the book, because in the book it's like, well, I was always heading off to Minas Tirith to claim my crown anyway. So it comes along as a lot more selfish. Whereas here it comes across as, well, we can still hold true to Merry and Pippin, and, it doesn't feel like he's just going to Minas Tirith.
which is how I think the film makes the moral point a bit better than which is why I think adaptations can be improvement in some aspects and
Yeah, yeah.
worse in others. So I don't hold differences in general against the adaptations.
Oh my god, and Frodo, I don't suppose we'll ever see them again. And then
Oh,
Sam at this point is still at the we'll see them again. And I
yeah,
guess he stays there really until they're at Mordor,
yeah,
when they've run
because
out of
that's
food, and Frodo's like, it doesn't matter, we're not going back. And I mean, it's amazing to me the capability of Sam to still have that little kernel of hope in him, and I guess
yeah,
it's good, it's not delusional, he has to have that. Um,
yeah. But it's part of growing up, because Sam is not. He's definitely younger than Frodo as well. So
yeah, well,
uh,
that's true, yeah, yeah.
and yeah, here we have the awesome credit music by Howard Shore. So um, The only thing I'll say is that I think I have to say I prefer the credits in The Lord of the Rings to the ones in the Hobbit films, but
I wonder if that's because that's what we view as being the classic, because it's what we came to know Peter Jackson as looking like in a way.
it's because I think I like Enya just a lot more. And obviously Annie Lennox did Into the West.
Oh, I love Into the West. I think the lyrics
Yeah.
are amazing.
Out of the three pieces that are, I would say Into the West is my favorite. Then May It Be by Enya, obviously, and then the last one is For the Two Towers, which is sort of linked to Gollum in some way. But I don't remember who sings it.
So now we come to like a million minutes of fan credits. Do you know anyone who actually did sort of contribute to the fan credits?
Oh, I don't know. No, sadly
No.
not. Because I don't think that. I wasn't aware of the extended editions until 2005, where I got the extended edition for The Return of the King.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I got the extended editions for the second film and for the first film. Yeah, those are. I would have liked to contribute, but I wasn't aware that you could. So I don't think that people from Belgium are basically on this list. So
Yeah.
and
But it's a lovely touch, though, and I think a really great way to engage with the hardcore fans, definitely.
yeah. So overall, I would say the first film is probably the strongest adaptation of the books, I think.
Do you think
Because
so?
that's always what I hear. Like people say, well, either there's a tiny, tiny minority that really hates the first film, and they say, well, with the next films it gets better because basically it gets more, you get more battles and everything. So I don't know.
Yeah, Two Towers is my favourite, I would say, probably. Mind you, I like them all in different ways.
Yeah, me too. I think I like the coziness of the first one. The fact that we're mainly in an area in areas full of trees and woods and big rivers and mountains and all that stuff, whereas like we get a lot of big plains in the second film with Rohan and everything, and obviously you get big battles and everything as
Yeah,
well.
I love Rohan. I think the third film would probably be my favourite because I love the whole Denethor dynamic, and
Yeah,
obviously I
even though
am literally in love with Faramir, but it's just the way because they've had to cram in that fourth act, and it always leaves me just feeling very unsatisfied.
yeah,
So it's an amazing film with then there's just very unsatisfactory coda, and it
yeah.
diminishes my enjoyment, but on its own I think it's amazing. Um,
And then, I guess to me, I think I prefer the third film as well because then you have sort of everything going into the climax of the story, and everything that we anticipated basically is resolved, and so I think that's why I prefer it because there we're at the height of the conflict, so that's where the stakes are highest as well. But I
True.
like the first film a lot because it's much quieter, much more introspective, and much more observant of it's building the world. It's not contracting.
That's true, actually, and I think in terms of, I don't know, like in mileage terms, do you just see more in the first film?
I think I sort of get more of a sense of the grandeur, like the big scale of the world than I get in the third film, because the third film has the battles obviously, and those are basically more plot related. They are much more about the story than they are about expanding the world and everything. So, and yeah, you were talking about the Denethor thing. I know a lot of people who don't like Denethor in the films because they say he's reduced to basically an asshole.
Yeah, but there's not much more in the books, babes, and I've looked.
But they say in the books you get much more of a sense that the author feels. He feels empathy for Denethor's despair, and that he's a much more sympathetic figure as a result of
Actually, yeah, no, that is
yeah.
probably true. I
And
mean,
the
you definitely get the feeling in the books that with the information available to him at that time, that his
yeah.
decision is, in a way, could be seen as rational.
Mm.
Um,
Which I think is, I mean, I think they had to cut that out from the film because, you have one Palantir, then you have another Palantir out of nowhere.
but also,
That's
after Saruman is dead, then you have to create the pantomime villain again. And
sort of
so
the
that
guy
has to be Denethor. So along your rationale that because Sauron is sort of unseen, we
yeah.
need to have that embodiment of evil. So yeah, probably they're right that Denethor does suffer as a result. But
He's not evil necessarily.
he's just mad,
Yeah,
driven mad by despair, and I think that is
yeah,
I don't think that
sympathetic.
does come across. But we'll, I
Yeah,
guess, if we do the
we'll
two.
talk about that when we get to that.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say I don't want to presume, but if we get to that, we can explore that because I really love the sort of Denethor, Boromir, Faramir dynamic, and one of the things I was most pleased about in the extended editions was that we got a little bit more of that material. So
Yeah, definitely, and I think it also ties back. I mean, it's like the secondary story. It's like the POV chapters of Boromir and Faramir. Basically, it's basically the secondary story, the one that underlines everything, the one that is basically that there's a through line because we know the conflict with Boromir. I mean, in the first film, and then we get to Faramir in the second one. And at least in the film, in the extended version, we also get a sense of the brother dynamic and also their relationship to their father, etc., which then leads into the third film where everything gets resolved. So I like that there's a through line there. But yeah,
yeah.
we are
Well, this was a bunch of fun yet again.
yes, but we have the fan credits basically now.
Yeah, which is kind of
I don't know. You asked me if I knew anyone. Do you know maybe someone who's on this?
no, but I was kind of vaguely aware it was happening, so I kind of regret that I didn't, because it would have been just awesome, I think.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, I'm glad that the films got made when they got made because if I'm not sure I'm not sure it's even possible to remake them, right? So it's better to have these versions that we got them as early as we did because then we wouldn't. Nowadays, I feel that we would have gotten a lot more CGI reliance and
Yeah, well, we got the Hobbit basically, right?
yeah.
So
So yeah, I'm glad that we got these films. At the end, because they were already working on those in the 90s, right? So it's like end of the 90s, early 2000s, where at least from a pop culture perspective, like people were a lot more carefree, I think. So it's like the
well, I
idea
think
that
there wasn't maybe that kind of widespread
stuff.
internet forum use to kind of whip everyone up into a frenzy of outrage because such and such change was happening.
We didn't have the perspective of everything like has to be post 9/11 something. It's this is even Peter Jackson has said these films are basically anti-war films, which given that the third film came out in 2003 was actually I think relevant in some
And his
way.
lead character is a pacifist, right? I mean, the whole concept of Frodo is he goes back to the
Yeah.
Shire and he's basically become a Quaker. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not far fetched.
That's what you wouldn't say. The only thing is that obviously he enjoys putting these battles on screen, and people enjoy them. Like people would probably say, if you wanted to make an anti-war point, you would have made these battles a lot less enjoyable. But I don't agree with that. So I think
Well, the problem is you can't show the true consequences of battle, which is basically gory dead bodies, without then getting losing the PG-13 certification.
Yeah, especially in a film. In a film that includes really small hobbits, going to destroy a ring of of evil, and it's like people would say, well, there's a dissonance here between between the fantasy trope figures that we see, right? There's the small people who basically save the world, and then you would probably have something like I don't know, Saving Private Ryan type battles in at the beginning, right? It's sort of there would be probably a dissonance in between the way the story is presented and uh, the message of the story.
Yeah,
So they would
absolutely.
probably say, if you want to make an anti-war film, make it an anti-war film, in modern times or something like that. Why would you choose a fantasy setting for this?
Yeah.
Which I don't agree with necessarily, because I think the medium is available for anyone to do as they like. Because I think you can tell anti-war. You can make an anti-war film about in a set in a fantasy world, right? I mean, it doesn't take away from the story, but I guess that's for some people it would be difficult to take it seriously if it is about I don't know, centaurs fighting, I don't know,
Yeah, a Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe stuff,
yeah,
basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's also something we should probably talk about, because there is there is a VOK that Amin did recently, yesterday I think, where he talked about the political aspects of A Song of Ice and Fire, and he had a guest on, and who is a professor, um, and he basically said the professor basically said, you don't get as many epic fantasy films because, I mean, you don't get as many imitators as with other stuff. Like, you get a lot of action films that are trying to imitate each other. You get a lot of science fiction films that are sort of about the same thing, like, AI and everything. But it's much more difficult to make a film of this scale again, right? It's much more difficult to imitate this.
Yeah, I guess I probably agree with that. Yeah.
Because you had The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which was as close to Lord of the Rings for a younger audience as you could get, right? But it wasn't. I mean, it still wasn't this. It didn't manage to surpass this.
But no, I mean, in fairness to Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, that is also a very developed and wide fantasy world.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
doing something different, but and its
sure.
concerns are more religious than political. But
Mm,
I think they're both actually comparably epic in scope. And actually,
yeah,
what's really interesting with Lion, Witch and the Wardrobe is that with the Fillory novels, Lev Grossman has created a world that does, in fact, riff on that
mm,
very successfully. I don't think anyone's done as successful an homage with Lord of the Rings, but it'd be fascinating if someone did, I think.
yeah.
Unless, of course, you assumed A Song of Ice and Fire was that homage.
I mean, for TV, it's definitely. I mean, this is A Song of Ice and Fire to me was always. I mean, Game of Thrones for TV was always to me what Lord of the Rings films were for um, the fantasy cinema, like fantasy on TV and fantasy in the cinema. Because basically now that we have Game of Thrones, it's much more difficult to make a simpler fantasy narrative work, because people's expectations are have somewhat been changed, right?
Yeah,
Which
and
is
they've
why
also been educated a little bit in the genre tropes, even if they hadn't
yeah.
read it before, I guess.
Hmm. And I guess it's also because we have TV basically being as it is now, where you have the interest in the anti-hero who or the uh, Byronian hero, basically the Byronian protagonist, who is basically unlikable, but you follow because he's the main character. So and so yeah, I think Game of Thrones is mostly about taking that into the uh, realm of fantasy. Um, and in that sense, I think it's pretty, it's defined what fantasy should be, at least going forward. And the Lord of the Rings basically was also a big influence on how fantasy films were perceived later on, right? Because then you got the Narnias and what I mean, I would say the Percy Jacksons, but maybe that's
Oh,
more
Jesus Christ, no.
Harry Potter. It's much more a riff on Harry Potter than it is on Lord of the Rings, anyway. But you got people attempting to make big epic fantasy films that actually didn't exist until Lord of the Rings, really, because most epics you got were historical epics, like this El Cid, or Fall of the Roman Empire or something like that, right? Um, yeah, and so I think it's much more difficult to sort of remake the films or make something in the same vein that is actually considered better by others, because then you would have to have really perfect actors, you would have to have a perfect score, a soundtrack or whatever, the cinematography, the costuming, and everything. There's so much care put into these films that I cannot see how someone would ever touch these films or the books.
But they will, because where there's an established franchise and brand name, there will be money, and I can easily see that happening again in 10 years' time, definitely.
They definitely want to remake Ben-Hur, for instance. They want to make a modern adaptation. They want to make another adaptation of Ben-Hur, which is, it's just silly.
Anyways,
yeah,
I better wrap this up. But
I would just, if I had to, because I think I feel obligated to, because I always do it on the forum of a podcast of Ice and Fire, where I talk about Berserk, the manga, which I think that's probably a story that sort of you could make into an epic film series if you wanted to, but even then I'd say it's probably too grim and nihilistic for a major mass audience to sink their teeth into. So
okay,
I don't know. Well,
maybe a plea if anyone from the studio, on the 0.1% chance someone's listening and has the money to go and have a look.
Just do it. Just cast Tom Hardy in the main role, because he has to be in everything now. No,
that's a bad thing.
I generally think, people have been saying that, but I think Tom Hardy is essentially this generation's Marlon Brando, where he can basically just change.
Well, I hope he ends up in a better place than Marlon Brando.
Yeah, he does. He should basically, or maybe he's much more consistent probably in his acting, like Marlon Brando. The way his career went was not spectacular.
Cool.
But anyway, we can probably, unless we want to see all the names fly by.
No. We can wrap this up. So I would like to.
There's a Lovejoy.
It's a very common name in England.
Oh.
But I would like to thank the listener for listening, and
I would too.
And Matthieu for joining in once again to the DVD commentary. And I guess at some point we'll kick on with Two Towers. But in the meantime, thank you very much, and hopefully this has been insightful and somewhat entertaining. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.